Closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So for today, we'll be discussing again some of the fundamentals in Python programming. So for our first topic, we will be discussing about variables. Okay, so most of you are already familiar with what is variables, but let's discuss what is a variable. So variables are containers for storing data values. So in programming, so every time we create, the reason why we create variables is that if we want to store a data somewhere. For example, if a user is going to input a value, that value has to be stored somewhere so it will not be lost. So that is the reason of why we create, or one of the reasons why we create variables. Okay, so in Python, Python has no command for declaring a variable. So it means Python is actually smart enough to identify what type its data type will be depending on what uh, value it's going to be assigned, or what value is going to be given to the var variable. So if a value of, or if an integer is being given to a variable, that variable will have to assign an integer as its data type. Okay, so it's actually smart enough to do that. It's actually the same with PHP if you have tried using PHP. Okay, so the next thing we have here is, here are some rules for naming our variables in Python. So most likely this is just the same with the other uh, fundamentals in naming variables with other programming languages. Okay, so first we have a variable name must start with a letter, an underscore character. Okay, so when we say by that, our variable can only start with any with an alphanumeric letters or variables. So it means from A to Z, or an underscore. If we're going to use special characters or numbers, that may cause our program to come into an error. So the second thing is, a variable name cannot start with a number. Okay, so this is in connection with our first rule. Okay, so for the third one, a variable name can contain alphanumeric characters, underscores, and numbers only. So these are the only three things that a variable name can compose of. Okay, so lastly, variable names are case sensitive. Now, when we say case sensitive, uppercase characters are different from lowercase characters. So, for example, as we have here in our presentation, we have three types of variables, but with the same variable name. The only difference is they differ from uh, the capitalization of and small letters, or how we declare them. Okay, so for the first one, we have it all in small letters. The second one, we have A as a capital letter, and the third one, all in capital letter. Okay, so when we say case sensitive, even though uh, they all have the same variable name, they are actually different from each other because of how we declare them. Okay, so for example, if I'm going to assign a value of 5 to our first variable age, which is all in small letter, and then I'll try to access the second variable, which has a capital letter A for age. It's not going to give me the value that I've assigned to the first variable, because it is actually different. So that's what we mean by case sensitive. Okay, so uh, if you're going to assign if you're going to declare a variable, you have to access that variable exactly how you declare it. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so next we have our data types. Okay, so for data types, actually, we have 7 types of data types in Python. So we have the text type. So as you can see, this is already familiar with this one, the text type. If we're going to use or output some strings, okay, or characters. So for this, we use the data type str. Okay, for the numeric types, okay, these are uh, the numbers or those if ever you have to perform uh, numerical or basic mathematical functions. These are some of the data types that you can use. You have integer for whole numbers, float for floating point numbers, and complex. Okay, so complex numbers, this is where uh, you're trying or you're for example of complex numbers are having like a x or uh, 9f. Okay, so that's when you start adding like what they call this one, letters on your numbers. Okay, so that's it. Okay. So next we have sequence types. Okay. So again, so I know this is the one that actually new to you. Okay. So hindi nyo pa narinig or medyo bago sa inyo. So when we say sequence, so a sequence allow you to store multiple values in an organized and efficient fashion. Okay. Kumbaga, this is like an array. Okay. Array. Okay? Para siyang array. But the only difference is, what's the difference between an array and a list? Okay? A list actually lets you organize it in an efficient fast manner, which is mas madali para sa inyo or mas madali compared sa array. Okay? So later on, we will be discussing kung ano yung mga bakit siya mas naging efficient compared kay array, no? But that's the point here. So sequence types, okay, sequence types allows you to store multiple values in an organized and efficient way. More like array but not an array. Okay? So example of this are list, tuple, and range. Okay? Yan. So the next one we have is actually mapping type. Now, again, how about mapping type? So, mapping type, we use yung function DICT, which is short for dictionary. Okay, DICT means dictionary. Now, ano ba, what does mapping do? Okay, so mapping allows us, again, it's still the same, no? It's just still, mapping is an object or the mapping objects are used to map hash table values of arbitrary objects. Now, to sum it up, to put it in layman's term, it's just simply it's just like creating an array. Okay? Gumagawa tayo ng array, but instead of using indices or index, di ba? When we create array, automatic meron tayong automatic index na sinostore para sa mga values natin. Okay? So, those index start with 0 and until depende kung anong range niya. Okay? So, mapping is just the same. Same lang din sila. It's actually parang same lang siya with sequence kung titignan. The only difference is, this time around, wala siyang index. But meron siyang ID. Okay? It's not using indices, but it uses an ID. Okay? And those ID are what we use para i-access yung mga values na nandoon kay dictionary. Okay? For example, I'm going to create a variable name, let's say list 1. And then I'm going to uh, use a dictionary or a mapping type. I'll say we have to give it two values actually, okay, for object. The first value is going to be the ID. So depende pa, it's still up to you kung anong gusto niyo ibigay na ID name sa kanya. For example, let's say student ID. ID is the student ID, and the value is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the next value is going to be the ID of that value is going to be student name. And then the value is going to be Juan de la Cruz. And then the third value, pwede yung ID niya is going to be course. And then the value is going to be BSIT. So something like that, or ganun that's how we use dictionaries. Okay? So instead of using indices, which is automatic na meron, hindi ko na kailangan i-declare, with dictionary, kailangan mo siyang bigyan ng ID. And that ID, it's the programmer who is actually declaring and assigning the ID name of that, or the ID name and the value for that one. Okay? So that's the difference. Okay? Okay, sige. So next we have set types. Okay, set types. So for set types, we have two types. We have set and frozen set. Now, para saan naman ngayon, what does sets do? So sets are used to, again, this is again used to store multiple items in a single variable. Now, the only difference this time is with sets, okay, you are sets are actually unordered and unchangeable. Okay? It's already unordered and hindi pa pwedeng mapalitan yung mga values niya. Parang naka-fix na siya kaagad. Okay? So, ganun yung problema sa kanya. And also, it is unindexed. So, pag sinabi natin index, wala tayong way para ma-access sila. So, these data types are used to store hindi. So, yun na. So, aside from it's unchangeable, unindex pa siya. Okay? So that's the difference. So with sequence and mapping, pwedeng palitan yung value, pwedeng dagdagan, pwedeng i-edit, pwedeng i-delete yung mga values sa list nila. But with set types, it's already fixed. So hindi pwedeng palitan, hindi pwedeng baguhin. So what's in there, yun yung gagamitin. Okay? So next we have Boolean types. Are you already familiar with Boolean types? Okay, we use bool to give us two if we want value of or we want a value of true or false, or Boolean types can hold a value of true or false. So we use the keyword bool for this one. Okay. So next is actually ito intriguing din do. Okay. So we already have Boolean, but we also have binary. So if you're going to ask me, sir, are they just the same? Diba? Kasi when you say Boolean, true or false, but then it's still 1 and 0. But when we say binary, binary is still just 1 and 0. Diba? So what's the difference? Okay? So in binary types, we have three types. We have byte types, byte array, memory view. Okay? So these are the three types of binary types that we have. So the difference with this one is that these data types, or the binary data types, are used to store raw binary data up in length of 32K to 1 byte. Okay? So, hindi with Boolean, true or false lang yung sinustore natin. But with binary byte, raw binary data mismo yung sinustore natin. So, this binary data is the ones that are, for example, is what is composed of every file that you have in your computer. For example, when we say an MP3 video, an MP3 video is composed of a raw binary data. So those types of data are the ones that are being stored on your binary types. So klaro yung difference natin with Boolean and binary type. Klaro? Intindihan ba? Okay, sige, sige. So, wala.
Yes, sir.
Sige, let's move on. Let's move. Okay. So, the next we have is ito, basic operation. So, I'm pretty sure you're already aware with this one. No? This is actually very basics. But still, let's discuss. Okay. So, first is assignments. How do we assign values to our variable? Simply, we just use the variable name and use the equal sign and the value you want to assign. So, for example, we have the based on our presentation, we have our variable name size and equal value and the value 40. So the value 40 will now be assigned to our variable size. Also, we can have it as A equals B equals C equals 3. Okay. So for numbers, we have integer, float, and the complex number. So as you can see, this is now an example of a complex number. Okay? So I'm not sure what they call, nakalimutan ko na kung ano yung tawag sa kanya, no? I'll get back to you when I remember, siguro. Okay? So as you can see, this is more like, ano na, the real for it's like an algebra type or high school or college mathematics. Okay, so as you can see for usually kasi ginagamit natin is yung ano the MDAS lang, di ba, for basic arithmetic operations with programming. But when with complex numbers, we can now perform or use yung mga more likely yung mga uh, what do you call this one? Yung mga high school mathematics, kumbaga, or college mathematics. Okay? So, next we have casting. Okay, what is casting? Okay, from casting is just simply changing a data type, a variable data type to a different data type. Okay? So, papalitan niya lang yung value. For example, if a value is an integer and you want to change it into a string, then that's when we use casting. Okay? So, for example, we have here x, and then you're going to give it, x is actually an integer, but then we want to give it, a string value, or the value that is going to be given to, or x is actually a string, sorry for that, string, but then 3 is an integer. So it cannot be given, or if you're going to assign 3 to x, it's going to be an integer. Yes, an integer. So if we want to declare it as a string, we're going to have to cast it. So the way to do that is to place an str in our uh, place an str keyword uh, on our value. Okay, so as you can see dito sa example natin. Okay, so yeah. So with that, the value is now going to be in string. And the same with the others who follow. So if we're going to place int, it's going to be an integer. Float is going to be a floating point value. So next we have strings. So actually there are some ways you can use strings, no? So we can use uh, a single quote, okay, and double quote to do this, okay? So, uh, now, for example here, what if we want to use uh, a single quote inside our string? Kasi di ba, if we're going to, based on our example here, it's hot. So we have to include a single quote inside a string that uses a single quote. So the way we can do this is we can use a slash, or we can just simply change the single quote to a double quote to do that. Okay. So next we have for the comment naman. Okay, if you wanted to use a continuous comment or a long comment, we use the three double quotes. Okay, so this is a continuous comment. So as long as it doesn't detect the ending three quotes, it will declare all inside it as a comment. So now we have the next we'll be discussing are string operations. Okay, so for next for this we'll have concatenate. Okay, so when we say concatenate, this is when we merge or join a string and a variable. Okay, so take note that we are or not just a string or two values that are being joined together. Okay, so for example, we have here word is going to be help plus the variable x, or uh, the string help plus a. So yung nawala ata yung plus. Okay, so that is concatenate. Okay, so you're already familiar with this one. So next we have subscript of string. So ito. So when we say string, okay, so we can use or uh, manipulate the values of a string kasi when we say string, string is still considered as a list. Okay, so if it's a list, there are some things we can do to manipulate it. So for example, when we have an hello string, if we're going to access the index 2 of this one, it's going to give us a value L. Okay, so because since it is less, so it has an index. So when we say index, we start with the index 0, which is H, and so and it follows. So 1 is E and 2 is L. That's why if you're going to uh, print, have the open close bracket 2, I will be followed. So next naman, we have slice. So if you just, there are specific values you want to access because for the first example, we just have a single value or one letter lang. So what if you want to just select specific value lang, okay? Or not more than one value but specific, okay? So let's say just the second to fourth letter, okay? So that's when uh, we use this type, okay? So we will have to assign the first value where it's going to start, followed by a colon, and then the ending index. Okay, the first index where it's going to start, colon, and the last index. So here, it's going to give us EL because index 1 is E and index 2 is L. Okay, so for the word, we can also have it for -1. So unlike in array, when we don't have a -1 index, in Java we have a -1. So when we ask for a -1, it's going to give us the last character of the string. And then if we're going to use the keyword len keyword. Okay, so len means length. So if you're going to use len to the variable word, it's going to give us how many uh, characters the value consists of. So hello, we get 5 from hello because hello is a 5 letter word. Okay, so klaro naman siguro, no? So, uh, so here are some string functions that are very usable or can help us or in programming. So we have find or the find function. So find searches the string for a specified value and returns the position of where it was found. Next, we also have index. So index searches the string for a specified value and returns the position of where it was found. And then we have split. So split the string at the specified separator and returns a list. So actually very ano dito useful din to, no? Yung split. Okay. So these are some of the things that you can use, or some of the many functions that are available in Python. So if you want to know more pa about this functions, you can just search it later on. Okay. So moving on. Okay, so we have ito. For the arithmetic operators, medyo you're already familiar with this one, but still there are some new operators here that I want to discuss. Okay, so for addition, it's very basic, just add. Subtraction, multiplication. Subtraction is when you're going to subtract the value. We use the minus operator to do that. You can see naman on the example. So for the multiplication, it's going to multiply the values. We use the asterisk uh, as its operator, and division is the backward slash. Okay, and then modulo naman, modulo is if we are going to modulo is when we're going to perform division, but it will only get the remainder of the uh, it will get the remainder. I'm not sure kung nakalimutan ko kung ano yung tawag sa answer ng ng division. I think it's ano ba? Fraction? Kalimutan ko, sorry. Okay. So it's going to get the remainder. But okay, but I wanted to focus on these last two, no? So medyo bago kasi to. So we have exponentiation. Okay. So when we say exponentiation, this is just having an exponent. Okay. So we use the operator to asterisk. Now, what do you say? What do you mean ba when we say exponents? Okay, so if, for example, we're going to have x equals 2 and y equals 5, what it's going to do is that it's going to multiply 2 by the value of 2 5 times. It's going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Okay? Simply exponent. Okay? Di ba meron tayong exponent ng mga x squared, remember, di ba? May mga x squared tayo. So, x squared equals to whatever the value is x is multiplied to the value of x. So, same with this one. The only difference is you get to choose the value instead of just squared, pwede kayong maghanap pa ng palitan yung value na yun. Okay? So, for example, if we're going to have x as 2 and y as 5, so it's going to multiply it at 2 and exponent of 5. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is going to give us an answer of actually 32. Okay? So, ganun yung ginagawa ng exponentiation. Okay? And then we have floor division. Okay? So, for floor division naman, it's just simply division. Okay? Division lang siya. The only difference is that with this one, it's going to give us the whole number. Unlike with division. Si division, if you're going to use division kasi, it's going to give you a floating point value. But floor division will give you a whole number. When you say whole number, walang point something. Okay? Wala yung mga point. Okay? Whole number lang. Kumbaga, integer siya. With division, it's going to give you float. Floor division gives you integer. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so ito, next we have list. Okay, so ito nga kanina. So, first, so as you can see, you're already familiar. So, first thing I want to discuss is a list can be heterogeneous. Now, what is a heterogeneous? Okay, heterogeneous simply means data elements that may have the same may not have the same. Yun, correction. Heterogeneous, heterogeneous are data elements that may not have the same data types. So, ibig sabihin, they can be inside a list, but the data inside those lists have the may have a different data types. For example, here, sa meron tayo, we have A, And meron siyang list, but then if you're going to look inside the list, iba-iba yung mga values niya. Meron tayong string, meron tayong integer, meron pang fraction, meron pang ano dito, formula. Okay? So, this is an example of a heterogeneous. Unlike an array, si array kasi is homogeneous. Okay? So, homogeneous naman must have the same data type. Okay? Again, homo, the same. Hetero, magkakaiba. Okay? So, yun yung ano nila. So, again, list can be a hetero. It can also be a homo. Okay? So, baka kasi isipin niya, sir, since hetero siya, does it mean that dapat iba-iba yung mga data types? Hindi. It's not, that's not just the point, no? So, it can also be homogeneous. Okay? Depende kung saan gagamitin ng programmer o saan ninyo gagamitin. Okay? So, okay ba tayo doon? So, next, a list can be indexed and sliced. Okay? So, when we say ito, so we have the difference with this one is index is naka-index siya based on the value. So when we say A0, since naka-index siya, 0 is going to be spam because an index always starts with the value 0. Now, when we say slice, it's just going to get the specific values or certain values that it wants. So for example, here we only want to access the first two values, which is egg and spam. So with this, we just have to write the value colon 2 to get the first value. But again, if we want to access the last two values, then it's also possible by just using uh, having the values 0, 1, 2, 2 colon 4 to get the last two values. Okay, you can try it on your own later on. Okay, so next is that a list can be manipulated. So when we say manipulated, you can perform operations on it. You can change the values, you can delete the values, and etc. Okay, so that's it. So which brings us to our next topic. So how do we manipulate those items? Okay, so first, we have access items. How do we access items in our list? So list items are indexed and you can access them by referring to the index number. Okay, so for example, here we have example this list. It has three values, apple, banana, cherry. And if we're going to print this list index 1, it's going to give us the value of banana. That's how we access the list or the data inside the list. Okay, and then to change the value, okay, to change item value, to change the value of a specific item, refer to the index number. Okay, so this time around we're going to select the index number and then replace it with the new uh, value that we want. Okay, so for example here, by referring to the uh, index 1, banana is going to be replaced with black currant. Okay, so that's what happened. Next, we have append. So when we say append items, this is how we add items in our list. Okay, so to add items in the end of a list, okay, take note, we can only add on the end of the list. Okay, so use the append method. So we just have, for example, here, as you can see, we just use this list that append and then the value that you want to add to the list. And by that, orange is already has been added to our list. Next, we have remove specified item. So how do we remove them? So with this, we just use the remove method. So by using the remove method, it is going to remove the specified item. Okay, so you can just have the remove and then use the or the name of the value that's going to be removed. Okay, and that's how we remove the items. Okay, hopefully you get it, huh? Okay, so let's move on. So now, next, we'll jump on to some basic programming. Okay, so when you say basic programming, so as you can see, we have here, we have I equals to 1, which gives I the value of 1. And then we'll just simply use a simple while and print I, and then use an indices to make sure that this loop will have to end somehow, no? So I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with this one. So the output for this one is just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so very basic. Okay, so uh, so now we have here some control flows. Okay, use in Python. So it's just a simple if if else if case statement. But for this example, we didn't have the case. Okay, walang case. Okay, so as you can see, just very simple. So we're going to input a value on and then uh, if the value of if its value is less than 0, it's going to give that value as 0, and then negative change, and then prints negative equals to 0. But if the value is 0, then it's going to change to 0. But if equals to 1, uh, it's going to be single, and else it's going to be more. Okay, so very simple if else. I'm pretty sure nagets ba to? If else, madali lang naman yung if else, kaya lang. Okay? So, di na tayo magtatagal talaga. Okay, so next, this is where I wanted to focus more on. Okay? Okay, so we have now flow control. Now, in Python, there are two types of loops na meron tayo. Okay? We have for and while. Now, actually, we use while loop, or with while loop, we can execute a set of statements as long as its condition is true. Okay? Based on the example kanina, as long as the statement is true, it just keeps on looping and looping and looping hanggang maging false siya. Basic looping, di ba? But with for is different naman this time. Okay? Kasi this time in Python, a for loop is used for it is used for iterating over a sequence. When we say a sequence, ginagamit siya ngayon para sa mga list. Okay? So, if you want to access a data from list and place them inside a loop, or you want to access them using a loop, that's where pumapasok si for. But if gusto niyo yung ano lang, parang normal na loop, then si while yung gagamitin niyo. Okay? But if it's going to include some sequences or list, si for na yung gagamitin natin. Okay? So for example, here we have a list or A, which has three values: cat, window, and defenestrate. So for us to access this one, we're going to use for x in A. So this is the forward. So for, and then the value, it's up to you anong gusto nyong, parang this is just a for variable, no? It's up to you anong gusto nyong gamitin. So usually we use the value x talaga. And then in, and then the variable that, or the variable name of the variable that contains the list, which is, for in this example, A. So if we're going to print that, it's going to give us cat, window, and defenestrate. So that's how we use for uh, on list. Okay. So next thing is that since we the difference in also the difference is with for, it doesn't have any arithmetic progressions. Okay? Unlike while, pwede natin lagyan ng x plus equals 1 until, so magi-increment siya ng 1 every time, and then hanggang sa maging ano siya, hanggang sa mag-false. Also, pwede natin we can parang what do you call this one? We can ano to? I forgot the word, no? We can observe kung ano yung or we can observe yung iterations na nangyayari. But with 4, hindi natin magagawa yon. That's why we have, in 4, we use the range function. Okay, meron tayong tinatawag na range to do that. Okay, now, what is a range? Okay, so, a range is a, wait lang a range is a function that returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0 by default and increments as it goes by. Okay, so if we're going to say range 10, so it's going to start with index 0 and then ends with index 9. Okay, the difference in here is you have to place the range value. Kayo naglalagay. Okay, so for example, we have here so we have range, range 10, so starts with 0, ends with 9. And then also, however, it is possible to also specify the starting value by adding a parameter. Okay, so for example, here, range 2, 6 means that the value starts from 2 to 6. Okay, but doesn't, it will, okay, since naka-index siya, so not including 6, so hanggang 5 lang yung kukunin niya. Okay, so para ba tayo dito? So mangyayari, okay, for this one, ang mangyayari dito is ang mangyayari dyan is mag-increment siya ngayon by, or mag-start siya by, by 2 hanggang 6. So, ang index, wait lang So, ang mangyayari dito is, okay. So, mangyayari dito is, starting value by, so mag-start siya with 2, then 3, 4, 5, and 3, 2, 3, and 2, 3 to 5. Okay, so yun yung nangyari. So, for the next one naman, mapapansin nyo, for our next example, meron tayong tatlong parameters na ginagamit. So, for this one, it's simply just the same with ginawa natin. Okay, it's going to start with 2 and it's going to end with 30. But the only difference is that third one means it's going to increment by 3. So, it's going to be plus, instead of doing it plus 1, it's going to have it plus 3. So if you want to change the increments on your loop for flow, you have to add a third parameter. So yung third parameter yung what you call this one, nag-adjust ng iterations niya. Okay? So moving on. So okay. So here we have this one. So now, okay. Okay, nakikita, okay, can you see meron tayo dito? So we have break and continue. So I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with break and continue. So with break, when the compiler sees the break, it's going to stop, it's going to get out of the get out of the iteration of the loop or doon sa if else sa statement. Continue naman is going to go doon sa location kung saan niyo gusto ipa-continue. Okay? Okay. So we have here a simple what do you call this one? We have here a simple code that uses a for. Okay? Can anyone tell me now, using this code, can you tell me what's going to be our first output sa code na to? Anyone? Anyone? Meron bang may idea ano yung magiging first value natin? It's going to start with 2, which means, so its range is to 10. So, ibig sabihin, value is going to start at 2. Anyone? Wala? O sige, I'll just make this an assignment for you to work on. Okay? Sige, sige, sige. So, with that, so that would end our meeting for today. I think that would be all, no? So, are there any questions, guys, before I dismiss you? Guys, nandiyan pa ba kayo?
Nonsense.
Yes, sir.